Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman in 22 minutes. Let's get right into it. Part 1. Two Systems. The characters of the story. In the context of understanding how we think and make decisions, it's helpful to imagine our mind as having two main characters, System 1 and System 2. System 1 is fast, intuitive, and emotional, making quick judgments and decisions without much effort. This system helps us with everyday tasks and immediate reactions, like pulling your hand away from a hot stove or recognizing a friend's face in a crowd. System 2, on the other hand, is slower, more deliberate, and more logical. It takes over when we need to focus on something challenging, like solving a math problem or making a decision that requires careful thought. This system uses more energy and takes more time, but it helps us manage complex situations and make better informed decisions. Attention and effort. When we focus our attention on something, we're actually using a limited mental resource. This focused mode is linked to System 2, the slower, more deliberate way our brain works. System 2 requires effort and concentration, which can be tiring. Think of how you feel after a long session of studying or a complex problem-solving task. When we are multitasking, we're not truly doing things simultaneously. Instead, we're quickly switching our attention from one task to another. Each switch uses up part of our limited mental energy. This is why multitasking often leads to mistakes or less effective work. Because our attention is limited, we can easily become distracted, especially when we are tired or our mental energy is low. This can lead us to rely more on System 1, which is automatic and requires less energy but is also more prone to errors. The lazy controller. Our mind often prefers the path of least resistance due to its tendency to conserve energy. When faced with a problem, we generally rely on quick, intuitive judgments rather than engaging in deep, critical thinking. This happens because the more analytical part of our brain, though precise, requires significant effort to activate. Recognizing when we are defaulting to this easier, less energy-intensive way of thinking can help us decide when it might be necessary to put in the extra effort for more complex and significant decisions. The associative machine. Our brain functions like an associative machine, meaning it connects ideas, memories, and experiences in a network of associations. This ability helps us quickly make sense of the world by linking new information to existing knowledge. For example, when you see a word like banana, your mind might instantly think of yellow fruit or even a specific taste. These associations happen rapidly and automatically, often guided by System 1. This associative mechanism is highly efficient but can lead to biases and errors. It can cause us to jump to conclusions or make decisions based on incomplete or misleading connections. Being aware of how associations shape our thinking can help us question our first instincts and consider whether our immediate responses are truly accurate or if they need more analysis from our more deliberate and rational System 2. Cognitive ease. Cognitive ease is when our brain processes information effortlessly, leading to a sense of comfort and confidence. This occurs when information is familiar, clear, and aligns with our existing beliefs, causing us to rely on intuitive, quick judgments from System 1. While this state allows for easy and fast decision-making, it can also make us overconfident and prone to errors. Norms, surprises, and causes. When something deviates from what we expect, it surprises us, prompting our quick thinking System 1 to seek immediate explanations. This often results in simplistic or biased interpretations. To ensure more accurate understanding, we can engage our analytical System 2 to critically assess these initial reactions, helping us respond not only quickly but also more thoughtfully. The machine for jumping to conclusions. Our brain, particularly through System 1, tends to make swift judgments based on limited information. This capability allows us to react quickly in situations, but it also means we're prone to errors when we make assumptions without sufficient evidence. Our mind fills in gaps in information with what it expects. To counter this, it's beneficial to slow down and engage System 2. How judgments happen. Our judgments often occur automatically and subconsciously, guided mainly by System 1. This part of our brain uses available information to quickly form opinions or decisions without us even realizing it. This process is efficient but can lead us to make decisions based on incomplete data or biases. To improve the accuracy of our judgments, it's helpful to bring in System 2, which thinks things through more carefully and checks whether our quick judgments make sense. Answering an easier question. Our minds, when faced with a difficult question, often subconsciously replace it with a simpler one that's easier to answer. This happens because System 1 prefers to deal with familiar and less demanding tasks. For example, if asked to judge the trustworthiness of a politician, we might instead answer whether we like their appearance or speaking style, as these are easier to assess. This substitution can lead to skewed judgments and decisions. Recognizing when we're simplifying complex issues can help us pause and engage System 2, ensuring that we're addressing the actual question at hand thoroughly and thoughtfully. Part 2. Heuristics and Biases. The Law of Small Numbers. We often jump to conclusions based on a small amount of information. This habit can lead us to believe that a few similar events are enough to predict future outcomes. For example, if a couple of employees from a particular team perform exceptionally, we might assume the entire team is outstanding. Realizing this bias helps us to stop and think more carefully, gathering more evidence to make sure our conclusions are really supported by enough facts. Anchors. When we make decisions, our thoughts often cling to the first piece of information we encounter, known as an anchor. For example, if someone suggests a price first during a negotiation, that number can shape the entire discussion, potentially leading to a higher or lower final agreement than if another starting figure had been proposed. The science of availability. If an idea or event is easily recalled, we tend to think it's more common than it actually is. This happens because memorable or recent experiences are more available in our memory, influencing our judgments and decisions. For example, after hearing about airplane accidents, people might overestimate the risks of flying, even though it's statistically safer than driving. Availability, emotion, and risk. When something leaves a strong emotional imprint, like a dramatic news story or a personal scare, it becomes more readily available in our memory. This heightened availability can make us feel that these events are more common and riskier than they actually are. For instance, intense media coverage of natural disasters may lead people to overestimate the likelihood of these events occurring. Tom W.'s specialty. When asked about Tom W., who is described through a brief profile suggesting he has characteristics of a librarian, people often guess that he is one, even if statistically it's more likely he's employed in another field due to the larger number of people working in other professions. This example illustrates how stereotypes in quick profiles can lead us to jump to conclusions without considering broader statistical realities. Linda, less is more. Linda is described as a politically active, outspoken philosophy major. When participants are asked whether Linda is more likely to be a bank teller or a bank teller who is active in the feminist movement, most choose the latter. This response is illogical because the probability of two events happening together, conjunction, is always less than the probability of either event happening alone. This example shows how adding more specific details can make a scenario seem more probable, even when statistically it is less likely. Causes trump statistics. Stories or specific explanations often have a stronger impact on our thinking than statistical data, even when the statistics provide a more accurate representation of reality. People tend to favor causal explanations because they are easier to relate to and understand, making them more influential in shaping beliefs and decisions. For instance, a vivid personal story about a recovery from a serious illness can be more compelling than statistical evidence showing the effectiveness of a treatment. Regression to the mean. Extreme values of something tend to move closer to the average over time. For example, if a student scores exceptionally high on one test, they are likely to score closer to their average on the next test, not because they performed worse due to less effort or ability, but simply due to statistical tendency. Taming intuitive predictions. Often, Our initial predictions about future events are based on our immediate gut reactions, which can be overly influenced by recent experiences or highly memorable examples. These predictions might feel right but often stray from statistical reality. To tame these intuitive judgments, we can apply a more systematic approach by considering base rates, how often an event generally occurs, adjusting our predictions based on relevant data, and actively questioning our initial assumptions. Part 3. Overconfidence. The illusion of understanding. We often believe we understand the detailed workings of the world around us far more deeply than we actually do. This cognitive bias leads us to overestimate our grasp on complex situations, making us confident in our ability to predict outcomes and control events. For instance, after an event has occurred, we tend to believe it was predictable and that we understood the factors that led to it, a phenomenon known as hindsight bias. The illusion of validity. When we get a lot of detailed information, we often feel more confident about making decisions or predictions. However, this confidence can be misleading. Even with lots of data, our forecasts might not be as accurate as we think, especially in situations like the stock market, where outcomes are highly unpredictable. Intuitions versus formulas. When comparing human intuition to mathematical formulas for making decisions, formulas often come out ahead in terms of accuracy and reliability. Despite our belief in the power of our gut feelings, studies show that structured algorithms or even simple rules of thumb frequently perform better, especially in complex decision-making scenarios like predicting student performance or forecasting medical outcomes. This doesn't mean intuition is always flawed, but it suggests that incorporating more structured approaches can significantly improve our decision-making processes, especially in professional settings where precision is crucial. Expert intuition. When can we trust it? Expert intuition can be highly reliable when it is the result of extensive training and experience in a specific field. In environments where patterns repeat and feedback is consistent and immediate, such as chess, medicine, or firefighting, experts develop a refined ability to make quick and accurate judgments. However, in situations where the circumstances are unpredictable or lack clear patterns, like stock market investments or complex business forecasting, expert intuition may falter. The outside view. When making decisions, it's helpful to step back and consider how similar situations have turned out, rather than just focusing on the specifics right in front of us. This method involves looking at broader trends and statistics to form more realistic expectations. For instance, when you're planning a project, rather than just hoping it will finish quickly based on your best-case scenario, you might look at how long similar projects have taken in the past. The engine of capitalism. Optimism plays a crucial role in driving capitalism. It fuels entrepreneurs and business leaders to take risks, start new ventures, and pursue innovations, believing they will succeed even in the face of potential failure. This positive outlook is essential because it motivates individuals to push boundaries and strive for growth, driving economic expansion and progress. However, unchecked optimism can also lead to overconfidence, where individuals underestimate risks and potentially face significant losses. Part 4. Choices. Bernoulli's errors. Daniel Bernoulli's early work laid the foundation for understanding economic behavior, particularly how people make decisions involving uncertainty and risk. However, some errors in his assumptions have been identified over time. Bernoulli assumed that people make rational decisions based on expected outcomes that will maximize their utility or happiness. This theory, while influential, often doesn't hold true in practice because people don't always act rationally or possess all the information needed to make such calculated decisions. Emotional factors, biases, and cognitive limitations frequently lead individuals to make choices that deviate from purely rational economic predictions. Prospect theory. Prospect theory explains how people make choices in situations involving risk and uncertainty, challenging traditional economic theories that assume rational decision-making. This theory highlights that people value gains and losses differently. Losses often feel more significant than equivalent gains. For example, losing $100 feels more painful than the pleasure of gaining $100. Additionally, people are generally risk-averse when it comes to profits but risk-seeking when trying to avoid losses. This behavior affects various economic decisions, such as investing or buying insurance, where the fear of losing can outweigh the potential benefits of gaining. The endowment effect. People ascribe more value to things merely because they own them. This means that once someone owns an object, they often value it higher than they would if they didn't own it, even if there's no material change in the object's value. For example, a person might refuse to sell a car they own at market price because they feel it's worth more to them, despite it being objectively worth that market price. This effect can influence a range of decisions, making people less likely to part with items they own, leading to potential missed opportunities for better alternatives. Bad events. Bad events often have a stronger impact on our emotions and decision-making than equally good events. This phenomenon, rooted in our psychological wiring, makes negative experiences more memorable and influential than positive ones of similar intensity. This tendency can affect our behavior and choices significantly, leading to a more cautious or risk-averse approach in situations where we've previously encountered negative outcomes. The fourfold pattern. When we make decisions, our approach to risk isn't always consistent and can vary greatly depending on the situation. When we have a high chance of gaining something, most people prefer a sure thing. For example, if offered a certain $50 or a 95% chance to win $100, many would choose the guaranteed $50. When we're likely to lose something, here people often take more risks to avoid a definite loss. Given the choice between definitely losing $50 or having a 95% chance of losing $100, many would gamble to possibly avoid losing anything at all. When there's a slim chance of winning big, people tend to take bigger risks. For instance, buying a lottery ticket for a small price offers a tiny chance of winning a huge sum, and people are willing to take that risk. When there's a small risk of a big loss, in these cases, people usually prefer to avoid the risk altogether. For example, paying a small amount for insurance to avoid the remote possibility of a devastating financial loss seems like a safer choice. These patterns show that our willingness to take risks can shift dramatically based on how likely we think a good or bad outcome is. Rare events. When something rare happens, we often don't judge its chances accurately. We might think it's more likely to happen if it's scary or exciting, like winning the lottery or experiencing a big disaster. This can lead us to make decisions that don't really match the actual risk, like spending too much on lottery tickets or buying more insurance than we need. By realizing this, we can try to think more clearly and make decisions that better reflect the real risks. Risk policies. Risk policies are strategies we use to manage the potential negative outcomes in our decisions. Instead of deciding each time based on the specific situation, setting a general rule or policy for handling risks can simplify decision-making and increase consistency. For example, a company might have a policy that requires certain safety measures in all its factories to minimize the risk of accidents, regardless of the specific conditions at each location. Keeping score. When we track our progress or compare it to others, it helps us understand how well we're doing and where we can improve. For instance, a business might monitor its sales to see if it's meeting goals or to see how it stacks up against competitors. Similarly, someone might keep an eye on their spending to make sure they're sticking to a budget. Reversals. Reversals happen when situations or decisions flip unexpectedly, leading to outcomes that are the opposite of what was anticipated. In everyday life, this can mean a sudden change in circumstances, such as a project that seemed destined for success suddenly facing major challenges, or an underdog coming out on top against all odds. Here it is important to stay flexible, to uncover the reasons for the reversal, and to reevaluate the situation. Frames in reality. How we see and understand things can be shaped by the way information is presented to us. For example, whether a sale is framed as 25% off or $50 off might affect how good we think the deal is. Events or products can also be framed as either good or bad and therefore influence our perception. By realizing that our views can be influenced this way, we can start to look more critically at the information we get. Part 5. Two selves. When we talk about our experiences and well-being, it's useful to think about two different aspects of ourselves: the experiencing self and the remembering self. The experiencing self is the one that lives in the present, feeling happiness, pain, joy, or disappointment as events happen. On the other hand, the remembering self looks back on those experiences and creates stories and memories from them. The difference between these two selves can explain why sometimes we might choose things that don't always bring us constant happiness. For example, people might choose a vacation that makes great photos and memories, even if some parts of the trip are uncomfortable or boring. Life as a story. When we think about our lives, we often view them as a story, where we are the main character. This perspective shapes how we remember experiences and make decisions. For instance, we might focus on moments that make good stories or fit a narrative we like, sometimes overlooking what really makes us happy day to day. Seeing life as a story can influence big life choices, like careers or relationships, pushing us toward options that seem impressive or interesting to others, even if they don't make us happy every day. Experienced well-being. Our day-to-day happiness is about how we feel in the moments of our lives, not just how we remember them later. It's important to focus on what makes us happy every day, like enjoying a job that feels rewarding or spending time doing things we love with people we care about. This helps us live a more fulfilled life by prioritizing our immediate feelings and well-being. Thinking about life. It's important to balance making plans for the future with living in the present. This means paying attention to our everyday happiness and making choices that not only aim for future goals but also make us feel good now. By doing this, we can create a life that feels fulfilling both in the moment and when we look back on it. That's it. Thinking Fast and Slow in 22 Minutes. A link to the book is in the description. Thank you for watching. Leave a like, subscribe, and share your thoughts and experiences with the book in the comments.